He was not a king. He was not a ruler. He was a god. At least, that is what 90 million people believed. For 3,000 years. And here is the darkest part. The pharaohs knew they weren't gods. They built the illusion anyway. Not because they were arrogant. Because they understood something about human psychology that most modern leaders still haven't figured out. Fear is more reliable than love. Love can fade. Love can turn. Love requires you to keep earning it. But fear stays. Fear doesn't ask questions. Fear doesn't organize rebellions. Fear simply obeys. And the pharaohs of ancient Egypt engineered that fear with a precision that should genuinely make you uncomfortable. Because the techniques they used are still being used on you today. Nobody is born feared. Fear is manufactured. And to understand how the pharaohs manufactured it, you need to stand where an ordinary Egyptian once stood, not in a museum, not in a textbook. In the dust, picture this. You are a farmer living in a small village along the Nile. You have never seen anything taller than a palm tree, and then they take you north to Giza and you see it for the first time. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, 481 feet tall, wider at its base than 10 football fields placed side by side. 2.3 million stone blocks, each one weighing between 2 and 80 tons, fitted together with such precision that you cannot slide a piece of paper between them. Your brain, built entirely from the experience of mud huts and riverbanks, has no framework for what you are looking at. It cannot be explained by human hands. It cannot be explained by human time. It can only be explained by a god. And that was precisely the calculation. The pyramid was not an engineering achievement. It was a psychological statement, delivered in stone, to every human being who would ever look at it. The statement was simple. The being who commissioned this is not like you, and a person who genuinely believes that does not rebel. They bow. Before we go further, you need to meet someone, because the most revealing thing about any system of power is not how it works when it succeeds. It is what happens when someone tries to break it. Around 1353 BCE, a young pharaoh took the throne. His birth name was Amenhotep IV. He was thin, strange-looking, deeply intellectual, and from the moment he took power, he made it clear he was going to do something that no pharaoh had ever done before. He looked at the entire religious and political infrastructure of Egypt, the temples, the priests, the dozens of gods, the centuries of tradition, and decided it was all wrong. He abolished the gods, all of them. Overnight, he declared there was only one god, Atan, the sun disk. He changed his own name to Akhenaten, meaning servant of Aten. He closed the temples. He dismantled the priesthood. He ordered the names of other gods, chiseled off monuments across Egypt, erased, as if they never existed. Now, what do you think happened to the people? The psychological rupture was enormous, not just politically, spiritually, personally, existentially. Akhenaten didn't just change religion, he pulled the ground out from under an entire civilization, and the civilization did not thank him for it. Remember this story, because we are coming back to it. And what happened next is the most important lesson in this entire video. You have seen the images, the double crown, the crook and flail, the false beard, the coal-lined eyes. For most people, interest in historical costume, it was not a costume, it was a psychological system, worn on a human body. When an ordinary Egyptian saw that crown, they were not seeing headwear. They were seeing visual proof that this one being had unified an entire civilization. 2 kingdoms, 1 ruler, the message delivered in a single glance, before a single word was spoken. Then the false beard. In ancient Egyptian culture, the beard symbolized divine masculine power. So significant was this symbol that even female pharaohs wore it, not as deception, as a statement. Power has a visual language, and she understood that deviating from that language, even slightly, would signal weakness to every priest, general, and noble watching. So she wore the beard, and she ruled. Then the crook and flail, the crook, a shepherd's instrument. I guide you, the flail, a weapon of force. I can destroy you, held simultaneously. In the same hands, in every official image. The entire philosophy of pharaonic rule, compressed into two objects, crossed over a chest. I will lead you, and if you resist, I will break you. This was not art. This was psychological conditioning, repeated in every temple, every statue, every official image, across thousands of years, until the symbols didn't just represent power, they were power. Here is something that even most history students don't know. For significant periods of ancient Egyptian history, the pharaoh was not commonly referred to by personal name in official contexts. He was called Per-A, the great house, not a person, a place, an institution so vast and permanent. It didn't have a human name, it had an address. Think carefully about what this does, psychologically. Language shapes thought. This is not philosophy. This is neuroscience. The words we use to describe something determine how our brain categorizes it. When you consistently refer to a ruler, not as a person with a name, but as an institution, you are changing how the brain processes that ruler. A person can be questioned. A person makes mistakes. A person gets hungry, gets scared, gets old. An institution just is like weather, like the Nile flood, like the rising of the sun. You do not argue with the sun. You organize your life around it. This linguistic strategy was not accidental. The priests and court officials who maintained this system understood something deeply true about human cognition. The moment a ruler becomes fully human in the minds of the people, the entire architecture of power begins to crack. Because humans challenge other humans. They do not challenge forces of nature. So they ensured, through language, ritual, and relentless repetition, that the pharaoh never fully became human in anyone's mind, including sometimes his own. Now we get to the mechanism that made everything else possible, the temples. Modern tourists walk through ancient Egyptian temples and see beautiful columns, painted walls, stone gods. Ancient Egyptians walked into those spaces and felt something closer to terror, because the temples were not places of comfort. They were places of transaction. Here is how the system worked. If you were an Egyptian farmer in 1500 BCE, your survival depended entirely on the Nile flood. Too little water, your crops die, your family starves. Too much water, your crops drown, your family starves. The right amount, at the right time, in the right measure, was the difference between life and death. And you believed, with every part of your being, that this flood was controlled by the gods, specifically by Hapi, god of the inundation, and Osiris, and Ra, and a dozen others. To influence those gods, you needed the temple. To access the temple, you needed the priests, and the priests served the pharaoh. The pharaoh had positioned himself between you and the force that determined whether your children ate this year. This is not religion in the modern sense. This is leverage, the most complete leverage any ruler has ever achieved over any population, because you are not just obeying a political authority. You are obeying the gatekeeper to reality itself. And here is the historical evidence that this system worked, not through force, but through genuine belief. Archaeologists excavating the workers' villages near Giza found something that dismantled a century of assumptions. The workers who built the pyramids were not slaves. They were paid laborers. They received wages, medical care. These were people who believed. They were doing sacred work for a divine being that would protect them and ensure the continued order of their world. The fear was not of punishment. It was of cosmic disorder, and the Pharaoh was the only thing standing between them and that disorder. Now we return to Akhenaten, the Pharaoh who dismantled everything. 17 years, that is how long his religious revolution lasted. 17 years of one God, 17 years of closed temples, 17 years of silenced priests, and then Akhenaten died. His son took the throne, a young boy, 9 years old. His name, you already know it, Tutankhamun. And the priests came back. Immediately, within months of the boy king taking power, the old gods were restored, the temples reopened, the capital moved back. And then, something remarkable happened. The priests didn't just restore the old system. They erased Akhenaten from history. His name was chiseled off monuments. His images were destroyed. His city was abandoned to the desert. His statues were smashed. In official records, he was referred to only as the enemy or the criminal of Akhenaten, never by name, because to name him was to acknowledge he existed, and acknowledging he existed meant acknowledging that the entire system had once been successfully dismantled by a single human being. That was the most dangerous idea in Egypt. More dangerous than any army, more dangerous than any invasion. The idea that the divine order was not actually divine, that it was constructed, that it could be taken apart, that it could be rebuilt differently. The priests understood that one successful revolution is the most powerful recruitment tool for the next one. So they did what the system had always done best. They didn't argue, they didn't debate, they erased, and it worked. For thousands of years, nobody knew Akhenaten existed, until 1887, when farmers digging in the Egyptian desert found clay tablets, letters written during Akhenaten's reign, from foreign kings to the pharaoh himself, proof that the erased man had been real, had ruled, had changed everything, and had been unmade, not by war, but by the deliberate destruction of memory,